4 an ER of 3, and so our grocery bills are quite high. My husband works at a tech company and I currently stay at home raising the kids who are 10, 7 and 3. I go food shopping at least twice a week and I usually go to the King near our house, though I sometimes go to the nearby Target as well. Those are two of a very small list of grocery stores in our quiet town. To give as much context as possible, we're an Italian family and I'm currently 40 years old. This happened not even a year ago when I was 39. I was running behind on shopping one day, so I went much later than usual. The King bias closes at 10, and it was definitely past 9 o'clock already, so I hurried over to the store with my flyers and coupons. The kids were complaining about a lack of food in the house. So I had to get a quick grocery run, and most days I'd have to go shopping with my 3-year-old daughter Haley since it was late, and my husband was home from work at this time for able to go shopping alone, which I consider a luxury. I got to the King which was pretty void of people at this hour, since it would soon be closing. I grabbed a cart and quickly started doing my laps down the aisles and grabbing whatever was on my list and whatever was on sale. I was in the cereal aisle when I got a tap on my shoulder which startled me. I turned and saw a very tan man about my height, with a baseball cap on, a black OT and a red zipper-up hoodie and jeans on. He left and apologized for startling me, and said that he'd been looking everywhere for a specific bag of chips that was in my cart, and he asked where I found them. I politely told him the aisle, and he said he checked but couldn't find it, so I actually led him exactly to where I found the chips. He thanked me with his awful breath, and I smiled and was about to walk back to my cart. But then he started making pointless conversation with me about why he liked those chips so much, something or a lack of a specific ingredient. I kept trying to make it obvious that I was inching my way back to my cart. He wouldn't get the hint, though. It was when he made a weird pause and then said, "Gosh, you're pretty that." I said thank you, and then I had to get back to my shopping before they close. I went to my cart, but he followed me and kept talking to me at this point. As politely as I could, I told him I really would just like to shop in peace. He finally seemed to get the hint and walked away, but for the rest of my time in the store that night, I kept seeing that man circling the aisles. And each time he walked past the aisle I was in, he'd slow down or even stop and just look down at me. I was getting increasingly uncomfortable and hurried up my shopping. When I was finally done, I went to the checkout, and as I emptied my card, here comes red hoodie guy with a whole 2 or 3 items, and he waits online right behind me. He doesn't say a word anymore, but I felt his gaze even through the back of my head. I was done checking out. I pushed my card away, and the man called out, "Have a good night, ma'am," and I ignored it. As I was unloading my car, I noticed the red hoodie guy in the parking lot looking at me as he walked to his car. He got into a junky-looking Honda that must have been like 30 years old. He didn't turn the car on, though. He just sat in it. I finally finished loading my car, so I got inside, started it, and began driving out of the parking lot. I looked in my rearview mirror a few times and I didn't see any headlights behind me, so I felt safe to drive home. It wasn't until I pulled into the driveway and looked to my left down the street that I realized there was a car with its headlights off driving slowly down the street approaching our house. He pulled to the curb a few houses down, looked to be that Honda from the parking lot. I went inside the house and called my husband's name. He came downstairs looking, and I was followed home by a creep. He hurried outside to the stoop, but by this time the car was already gone. The following weekend, late at night when we were all in bed, we heard some shuffling around outside in the side yard. I shook my husband to go check what it was, and he went to slide the window open. He saw someone right below the window trying to open the side gates the backyard. But after hearing the window slide open, the man looked up and started to run. My husband grabbed the baseball bat from under the bed and ran outside, and when he came back a minute later, he said he saw the car speeding down the street, and he tried to chase after it. Perfectly described the shitty Honda that the red hoodie guy was driving. It was undoubtedly him. We phoned the police, and given the late hour, a police officer arrived to our house in under 5 minutes. I described the man and his car the best I could, and that was that he never returned to our house, not after seeing my angry husband chasing his car on foot with a bat. Still remains uncomfortable that a creep like that knows where I live, though. When I was in college, I worked at Wallbounds. The one I worked at was a 24-hour one, so a couple unfortunate people would always be stuck working that awful shift. I thought since I was 20 and in college that my boss would never put me on an overnight shift, but unfortunately I guess when she has my school schedule and I told her I was off Mondays and Wednesdays, she saw me as a perfect sucker to stick on the overnight shift, occasionally moving forward. One day I saw that I was scheduled for a Tuesday night from 12 a.m. to I had to triple check the schedule to make sure that that was right. I felt sick seeing that, and when I asked my supervisor why I was put on the overnight shift, he told me if I'm over 18 I don't really have a choice. I considered quitting, but I needed the job and money, so I just sucked it up and decided I'd do it this one time and then tell my boss I can't do it ever again because I have to study for school. So I arrived at the store at 12 o'clock and relieved my coworker Amanda. Half the lights in the store were out at this hour to save on electricity. There were a surprising amount of customers in the store when I got there, I guess. More people than I expected would do quick midnight shopping runs past 1 a.m., though the place was completely dead, maybe 3 customers in the entire hour. As it got later in the night, there were less and less customers. It was past 2 a.m. By this point, I was as bored as humanly possible, and there hadn't been a customer in over an hour. I wondered if there were any other employees in the building. There had to be. I figured they couldn't have a lone 20-year-old running the whole place by himself. There was some bald guy who looked like he could be a manager that kept passing by the front registers. Every few minutes he had a key to his khakis with like 10 keys on it, and he was holding a small backpack-type bag in his hand. So I said, "Excuse me, are you the manager?" And he came over and asked if it was my first day on the job, to which I said it was my first night shift. He shook my hand without giving me his name and asked me if I could go to the back warehouse of the store and organize the pallets. He said he'd watch the front. I didn't exactly know what that meant, but I'd figure it out. I walked towards the back of the store, and as I did, I saw him doing something to the entrance door of the store, like he was reaching for some switch on the side of it, as if he were locking it. I made my way into the back warehouse, where I saw a tall man who looked like he were 30 wearing a manager's vest that said "Wall Bounce." He saw my apron and introduced himself as Rob, the night manager. I said, "Oh, I thought the guy in the front was the night manager." And he looked puzzled and said, "Who?" When I man from before, he asked me to show him who I was talking about because he was the only manager on duty. We didn't even make it out of the warehouse before all the lights in the store turned off. Rob told me to wait in the warehouse. While he checks out what's going on, I watched as he walked through the warehouse doors into the darkness of the store, with the only light out there being from the lights of the dairy coolers that were still on. I sat on a box on the pallet and was on my phone trying to text any of my friends who could have been awake about what was happening, when I heard a door from inside the warehouse. Opening was on the other side of the warehouse, separated by the freezer and dairy fridge. There were 2 ways in and out of the warehouse back into the store. I still sat there now with my ears perked up listening for any sounds when I heard quiet, slow footsteps getting closer, followed by a voice saying, "Hey kid, you in here?" But it wasn't. Was that bald guy's voice? I hurried out the warehouse doors into the store, but quietly I jogged to the front of the store looking for Rob, but I couldn't find him. I called out his name, nothing. I grabbed my jacket and tried to open the exit door, but it wouldn't open automatically, so I tried to physically open it, but it was locked. I heard footsteps approaching from behind me, and I turned and almost screamed, but I realized it was Rob, the manager. He flicked some lever or something on the top right of the door and unlocked it, and he said in a panicked whisper to hurry and get outside. He followed behind me. We left the store and he got right on the phone with the police, and I heard his whole conversation. He said he believed an armed man locked himself into the Waldums and was probably trying to rob the place. I told him to tell the police that I think he was coming to harm me in the warehouse, which he relayed to the operator. He told me I should go wait in my he didn't want the store to be held liable for anything. If something were to happen, I went and sat in my car and just watched for a little while, and within 10 minutes there were at least 4 police cars outside the store. They all went inside for a while and I didn't see whatever was going on, so I left. I didn't quit after that though. The next time I went into work I was told all about what happened by my supervisor. The security footage showed that bald man circling the place, acting suspicious, checking if the coast were clear to do whatever he was planning to do. After locking the doors, he cut the lights in the store. The cameras showed him going straight to the warehouse, where he told me to go. That's the scariest part to me, because if he were armed and robbing the place, he could have been on his way to put a gun to my head or something. The camera showed him leaving through the emergency exit in the warehouse way before the police arrived. In the end, I never worked an overnight shift again after talking to my boss, and I stayed at that job for another few months. I'm not sure if that man was ever identified. I used to work as a night restock worker at a supermarket in a somewhat rural town. The store was called Great American. It was the biggest and best supermarket in the area. My shift would be as soon as the store would close at 10. I'd work from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m., the latest, restocking the shelves and organizing everything before the next operating day. I, of course, had the keys to the store for the after hours. It would be a team of two, myself and one other, either Terry Carter or Alfonso. Tonight I was supposed to be working with Terry. I arrived to the store and let myself into the back where all the inventory yet to be stocked to us. I started my work using the pallet jack to bring a whole pallet of boxes out to the shopping floor. I started with the bread and nuts aisle, rotating in the front and putting the newer loaves in the back. Halfway through, I realized I hadn't seen Terry yet. I walked to the back area of the store where the inventory was, where we leave our belongings. He wasn't back there yet. I left the back door cracked open with a door stopper for him when he would show up. So I went back to work for another half hour, and with still no sign of Terry, I once again went to the back of the store. He wasn't in there, but I noticed the back door was shut. I assumed that meant Terry was here somewhere. I went to open the back door and saw the door stopper was outside, which I thought was weird that he kicked it outside instead of bringing it in. I called Terry's name and it echoed through the room. He didn't call back. So I decided to call him. He picked up sounding like he was in bed, and I asked him if he was at work. He said he wasn't coming in tonight because he was sick. Suddenly I got the chills. I told him someone kicked the door, and he said it could have just come undone itself. Nobody else was scheduled to work that night. I told him feel better and we hung up. I wasn't sure if I was convinced that the door stopper came undone itself because I kicked it under the door pretty tightly. I did a quick look around just to make sure no one was in the back of the store, and when I didn't see anyone, I went back to work. Though I felt a slight sense of unease the whole time I was stocking the remainder of the bread, when I heard a loud sound echo from across the shopping floor. Okay, now someone had to be in here. I got off my knees and went to the middle aisle that intersected all the other aisles. I looked straight down the aisle and stood there for a hot second, and all the way on the opposite side of the store in the dairy aisle, a man dressed in black walked past the middle aisle, looking down in my direction. I felt my heart drop. It felt like that scene from the movie Signs where the alien walks past the birthday party. To think logically that maybe this was someone else filling in for Terry's shift that our boss didn't tell me about. I started to speed walk down the center aisle and yelled, "Excuse me," very loudly. I looked to the left. Down every aisle I passed since he went towards the front of the store, in one of those aisles he was waiting at the end of it, standing there fully facing my direction. When he saw me, he walked out of sight in the direction I was just coming from. I yelled, "Excuse me," again, and started to run down that aisle to catch up to him. I didn't get a good look at his face yet. When I got to the front of the aisle by the cash registers, I looked down the direction he went, and I saw him all the way at the end by the bread aisle. Half his body was hidden behind the shelf. His mouth was hanging open, and he started to wave me over, but he didn't say anything. His face was freaking me out. I attempted one more time to speak to him and said, he disappeared behind the shelf. I wasn't being paid enough for this. I went outside to sit in my car and call my boss. He picked up and I told him there was some random freak roaming around the store. He told me to get him out of there if I can, or call the police to get him out. I was not going to attempt to physically remove a crazy person from the store. So I called 911. I waited in my car until a police car showed up. I greeted the officer and asked him to follow me inside. We walked around the place looking for the man, and we saw him at one of the aisles again, creepily, standing there again as if playing a game. When the police officer commanded him to come here, he actually listened. He was put in handcuffs, and he was the strangest man I'd ever seen. He kept smiling and looking at me non-stop, licking his lips. He had huge bags under his eyes. The only words he spoke were when answering the police officer, saying he was looking for a snack I didn't like. The way at me as the police officer was walking him back outside to his car, it was this menacing, threatening smile that I haven't forgotten to this day. I continued my work after that. Needless to say, I never left any of the doors open again. Working as a cashier at the local supermarket, you get to know the regulars, exchange small talk with strangers, and sometimes laugh with coworkers during the slow shifts. It was simple work, and for the most part, uneventful. That's probably why I liked it. Nothing too out of the ordinary ever happened. I never thought I'd dread going into work at a place as ordinary as a supermarket. But after what happened, every shift started to feel like a countdown to the next unsettling encounter. It started like any other day. I just clocked in for the afternoon shift. The sun still shining through the big front windows of the store. It was one of those slow weekday where the most exciting part of my shift was waiting for the dinner rush. I'd been working at this store for over a year, so I knew the rhythm of the place. Morning regulars came in for their newspapers, and coffee lunch rush brought a crowd, and then things would slow down until people stopped in on their way home from work to pick up last-minute groceries. It was predictable, comforting. Even I settled into my usual checkout lane, exchanging pleasantries with customers and scanning items with a mechanical efficiency. Everything was normal until I saw him. He wasn't exactly memorable. At first, a man in his late 40s, he came through my line with just a few items: a loaf of bread, a six-pack of beer, and some chips. When he handed me his money, his fingers brushed mine, lingering just a bit too long. It was enough to make me uncomfortable, but I shrugged it off. People are awkward, sometimes, no big deal. But then he looked at me, really looked at me with this intensity. His eyes were locked on mine. "Have a nice day," I said. Left me on edge. He didn't say anything, just gave me this weird smile before grabbing his bag and walking away. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. The man came back the next day and the day after that. At first I didn't think much of it. We had plenty of regulars and I figured he was just one of them. But then he started showing up every day, always in my line, even when others were shorter, and always with that same unsettling stare. He didn't say much at first, just handed me his money and walked away. But there was something about the way he looked at me, like he was watching me more closely than he should. His eyes would linger on my face, and sometimes I could feel him watching me even after he'd already left the check out. My coworkers didn't seem to notice, and I didn't bring it up. I told myself it wasn't a big deal, that maybe I was overreacting, but it was hard to shake the growing unease that crept up every time I saw him walk in. The comments started. "Your hair looks nice today," he said one afternoon as he handed me his payment. "Thanks," I replied, keeping my tone light, even though his comment made me even more uncomfortable. It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it, like he was cataloging every detail about me. From then on, every time he came through my line, there was a new comment. "Pretty eyes, nice smile. You're here every day, aren't you?" His words always hung in the air long after he left, and I started dreading the sound of the door chime every time a customer walked in, afraid it would be him again. It was like this invisible weight pressing down on me. Every shift, a creeping anxiety that made my skin prickle. When I wasn't working, I tried to push it out of my mind. I spent time with my friends, watched movies, did normal things, but every time I walked into work, that sense of unease returned. It felt like something was building, like the situation was teetering on the edge of something. Worse was, but I could feel it coming. One evening when the store was nearly empty, and I was halfway through my shift, he came in again. This time he didn't grab any groceries, he just walked straight up to my checkout lane, that same weird smile on his face. "Are you single?" he asked. My first instinct was to lie, to say I had a boyfriend, but my throat was too dry to speak. I managed to force a laugh instead, trying to keep things light. "I don't really talk about personal stuff at work," I said, hoping it would end the conversation, but it didn't. He leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. "What time do you get off work?" The question sent a jolt of fear through me. My mind raced, scrambling for an answer that wouldn't give him what he wanted, but wouldn't antagonize him either. I didn't want to make him angry. I didn't want to escalate the situation late. I mumbled, trying to sound casual. "I work late." He didn't say anything after that, just gave me another one. I turned and walked out the door. Was he going to wait for me? Was he planning something? The rest of my shift dragged on in a blur, my eyes constantly flicking toward the front doors, as if expecting to see him waiting for me. Every minute felt like an hour, and by the time my shift ended, I was practically shaking with anxiety. As I clocked out and grabbed my bag from the back room, I tried to convince myself that it would be fine. I'd walk to my car, get home, and everything would be okay. But when I stepped outside, the night air felt too still, too quiet. I spotted him immediately. He was standing near the edge of the parking lot, half hidden behind a row of cars, watching me. I stopped dead in my tracks, frozen with fear. What was he doing? Why was he still here? I panicked, and for a second I didn't know what to do. My car was only a few rows away, but the thought of walking past him, of getting anywhere near him, was too much for me. I fumbled for my phone and dialed. "He's here," I whispered. "The guy, he's still here." Within moments, my manager was outside, his face stern as he marched toward me. "I'll walk you to your car," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I nodded, my legs feeling like jelly as we made our way across the parking lot. The man was still there, his eyes following me the entire time, but he didn't move, he just stood there watching. When we reached my car, I could finally breathe again. I thanked my manager, climbed inside, locked the doors, and I drove away. I didn't see him again after that. For weeks, I went to work every day, always on edge, always scanning the parking lot, the aisles, the checkout lines, waiting for him to come back. But he never did. Part of me was relieved. Part of me was terrified, because even though he never came back, the memory of the way he stood in the parking lot has never left me. I still feel like he's out there waiting for the right moment. And that's the worst part. Conversation could end like this. In fact, I've always been the kind of person who enjoys striking up small talk with strangers, whether it's in line at the bank, waiting for coffee, or grocery shopping. I guess I've always thought of myself as friendly, someone who could chat about nothing and not worry about it turning into something sinister. That changed the night I met him. That evening I was at the local supermarket picking up a few things for dinner. It wasn't anything special I needed: pasta, tomatoes, some fresh bread, easy stuff. The store was pretty quiet by that time, mostly just a few people browsing the aisles. I had no idea that I wouldn't be able to shake the encounter that would follow. Me home. The supermarket was one of those mid-sized chains that always seemed too narrow, the kind where every footstep echoes a little too loudly. I grabbed a basket and wandered through the produce section, picking out a few tomatoes, a cucumber, and these late-night grocery trips, because they were calming, almost meditative. As I made my way toward the bread aisle, I noticed him, an older man, maybe in his early 70s. He had the kind of face that made it hard to guess. His age lined with wrinkles, but his eyes were sharp. Too sharp for someone who looked so weathered. I caught his eye as I passed, giving him a light nod. I grabbed a loaf of sourdough and tossed it into my basket. I wasn't one to overthink things. I continued my shopping, moving to the pasta aisle next. As I stood there debating between two different brands of spaghetti, I heard a soft chuckle behind me. I turned and saw him again, the same man from the bread aisle. He was standing just a few feet away, his cart empty, his eyes fixed on me, and with a frozen smile plastered across his face. "Pasta, huh?" he said, his voice raspy. "Good choice." I forced a polite smile, though my heart had started to race. "Yeah," I replied. "Easy dinner." He nodded. "That's strange." Altering, his eyes still locked on mine. It was like he wasn't just making small talk, like he was trying to latch onto something deeper. His gaze felt invasive, like he was looking past my eyes and into my mind, reading every thought I tried to hide. "Do you cook a lot?" he asked, taking a slow step toward me. "Sometimes," I muttered, quickly grabbing the pasta and tossing it into my basket. I didn't want to seem rude, but I was suddenly very aware of how empty the aisle was, how isolated I felt. "Well, I'm sure you're a great cook," he said. "You seem like someone who knows what they're doing." That comment made me pause. There was something about the way he said it, like he knew me, like he'd been watching me for a long time. I looked down at my watch, pretending I was in a hurry, hoping it would give me an excuse to leave. "Well, I should finish up," I said quickly, offering him a strange smile before turning my back to him. I moved to the next aisle. Still feeling tense, I told myself that it was just an old man trying to make conversation, but there was something about his presence that set my nerves on edge. I grabbed the rest of the things I needed as quickly as possible, but he was nowhere to be found. And for a brief moment I let out a sigh of relief. I headed toward the checkout lanes, my basket full and my mind focused, fused on getting home. The store felt emptier than before, the aisles stretching out like long, narrow corridors of silence as I placed my items on the conveyor belt. I looked around, scanning for any sign of the man. Nothing. Maybe he had left. Maybe I'd overreacted. The cashier rang up my items and I paid without any more thoughts of the old man. I was just being paranoid. I told myself the weird feeling in my gut was nothing more than an overactive imagination. But as I walked out into the parking lot, I saw him again. He was standing by the entrance, leaning against the wall, that same frozen smile still on his face. My heart felt my hands clench around the handles of my grocery bags. He didn't say anything, just stood there. I kept my head down and walked toward my car. I could feel his eyes on me the whole way my car was parked near the far end of the lot, and with every step I took the parking lot seemed to stretch farther and farther. As I fumbled with my keys, I couldn't help but look back. He was still standing there, still watching, that smile never fading. But now there was something darker in his eyes, something that made my skin crawl. I got into my car, locked the doors, and pulled out of the lot. I didn't want to see him watching me. I didn't want to know if he had moved. As I drove home, the tension in my chest began to ease. When I got home, I locked all the doors, double-checked the windows, and tried to shake off the lingering fear. I told myself I was safe. Now he was just some strange man. I would never see him again. But as I sat down on the couch, the groceries in the kitchen, my phone buzzed. I looked down. It was a text message from an unknown number. "You made it home safely. Good, I knew you would." I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. How did he know? How did he get my number before I could react? Another message appeared. "I told you, you seem like someone who knows what they're doing." My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I blocked the number, deleted the text, and tried to calm myself down, but the fear was too strong, too real. I didn't sleep. That night I couldn't. Every little noise in the house and the wind outside set my nerves on edge, my mind racing with images of that man and his frozen smile. I never saw him again after that night, but I'll never forget those texts, the ones that made me realize he had been watching me, following me. I still wonder how he got my number, and I still wonder if one day I'll look up in the supermarket and see that frozen smile staring back at me, because somehow I know he's not done with me yet. I've always been the kind of person who prefers shopping late at night. I enjoy the quiet, the lack of crowds, and the ability to move through the aisles at my own pace, without bumping into anyone there. Something calming about a nearly empty supermarket. But it was during one of those quiet nights that I experienced something I'll never forget. It was a Wednesday, around 10:30 p.m. I realized I was low on groceries. It had been a long day at work, and I wasn't in the mood to cook, but I needed a few things for the rest of the week. I thought I'd pop over to the local supermarket, grab what I needed, and be back home in less than an hour. It was a plan I'd followed countless times before. The store was about 10 minutes from my apartment, in one of those quieter parts of town where things close early and the streets empty out by dusk. As I pulled into the parking lot, I noticed only a handful of cars, mostly near the front entrance. I liked it that way. Fewer people meant I could get in and out quickly. I parked, grabbed my reusable bags, and made my way inside. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh. The store was quiet, almost eerily so, with only the occasional squeak of a shopping cart breaking the silence. I grabbed a cart and started my usual routine: produce first, then dairy, meats, and snacks. I always move through the store the same way. There's something comforting about routines, especially when you're tired. It was the same cart, the same aisles, the same mindless process. But as I turned down the snack aisle, something caught my eye. There was a man leaning against his cart. He was tall, with disheveled clothes and a scruffy beard, his hair sticking out in all directions, as though he hadn't bothered to comb it. He was muttering to himself, his lips moving rapidly, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. His eyes were wide, darting around the AI for something or someone. I hesitated for a moment. There was something off about the way he looked at me, something almost predatory, though I couldn't put my finger on why. I quickly grabbed what I needed and moved to the next aisle, shaking off the strange encounter. People talk to themselves all the time. I told myself he was probably just eccentric, or maybe having a bad day. But as I continued through the store, I couldn't help but look over my shoulder, fearing he might be following me. I made my way to the dairy section, standing in front of the rows of milk and yogurt, when I heard it again, that same low muttering. I turned, and when I looked, he was standing at the end of the aisle again, staring at me with that same intense gaze, his lips still moving. Though no sound came out this time, the store was almost empty. Just me, the man, and a cashier up front who seemed oblivious to everything happening in the aisles. I tried to ignore him, pretending to focus on dates of the milk in front of me, but I could feel his eyes on me, and that started to worry me. I grabbed the closest carton of milk and hurried to the next aisle. I told myself it was nothing. He was just a weird guy, that's all, but my hands were shaking. As I tossed the milk into my cart, I tried to distract myself by checking off the remaining items on my list. Bread, lunch, meat, eggs. But no matter where I went, I kept seeing him every time I turned into a new aisle. He was there, standing at the opposite end, watching me with those wide, unblinking eyes. I didn't know what to do, but the more I moved through the store, the more I realized that he was just following me. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I looked around the store, but there was no one else in sight. The cashier was too far away, probably scrolling through her phone, unaware of what was happening. I felt trapped. I made a bean for the self-checkout machines, my cart rattling as I could without breaking into a full-on run. I could feel my skin prickling with anxiety as I scanned my items, my eyes darting around the store, searching for any sign of the man. For a moment I thought I'd lost him, but as I looked up there, he was standing just beyond the checkout area, his eyes still locked on me, his mouth moving in that same rapid, silent muttering. I could feel the weight of his gaze pressing down on me. My hands shook as I swiped my card, praying the machine would move faster. I kept looking at him out of the corner of my eye, my stomach twisting in knots. Finally, the machine beeped, signaling that my transaction was complete. I grabbed my bags and bolted for the door as I stepped outside into the cool night air. I felt a brief moment of relief wash over me. The parking lot was empty. I hurried to my car, fumbling with my keys as I tried to unlock the door, but then I heard it, the sound of footsteps. I turned and there he was, his hands clenched. His eyes still fixed on me for a moment. We just stood there staring at each other, the silence between us heavy and suffocating. I didn't know what he wanted, and I didn't want to find out. I quickly unlocked the door and threw my bags into the passenger seat. I slid into the driver's seat and slammed the door shut. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key into the ignition, but after a few frantic tries the engine started. I peeled out of the parking lot, my tires screeching as I sped down the empty road. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The thought of seeing him still standing there watching me was too much. When I finally got home, I sat in my car for a long time trying to calm myself down. I couldn't shake the image of him, his wide, unblinking eyes, the way he had followed me through the store, his lips moving in that silent muttering, and I had no idea who he was or what he wanted. And now every time I hear the sound of footsteps behind, my heart stops a second, because you never know when you might run into someone like him. I always saw grocery shopping as just another routine task. It's one of those everyday tasks that we all do on autopilot. Grab a cart, weave through aisles, toss the usual items in, and get out as quickly as possible. Nothing about it ever struck me as dangerous or unsettling. In fact, I kind of enjoyed the mindless routine of it. At least I used to. Now every time I step into a store, I get this sinking sensation like there's something lurking just beyond my line of sight. Because that's where it started. Just an ordinary trip to the supermarket. It was a Saturday afternoon and I had just finished my shift at work. I figured I'd swing by the grocery store on my way home, grab some things for dinner, maybe a bottle of wine to relax with. Later, the store was one of those big chains, clean, well lit, usually crowded with families. Nothing unusual. I pulled into the parking lot, grabbed the line outside, and walked in. The cold blast of the AC hit me as I stepped through the automatic doors, and I remember feeling a small sense of relief at the familiar low murmur of shoppers. It felt normal, safe. I started in the produce section, absent-mindedly tossing apples, some leafy greens, and a bag of baby carrots into my cart. As I reached for a bag of oranges, I noticed someone standing at the far end of the aisle, a man late 30 seconds, maybe early 40 seconds, wearing a dark jacket. That seemed a little out of place for the warm weather outside. He wasn't looking at the fruit, he was looking at me. I felt a twinge of discomfort, but I brushed it off. Maybe he was just spaced out or thinking about something else. I moved on to the next aisle, mentally checking things off my shopping list. As I went, about 10 minutes later, I found myself in the snack aisle grabbing a bag of chips when I noticed him again. The same man. He was standing at the end of the aisle, his cart empty. He wasn't pretending to browse or looking at anything else. He was just there. I thought it was a bit odd, but I tried to ignore it. People cross paths in grocery stores all the time. It's not unusual to see the same person more than once. But something about the way he stood there, motionless, silent, set off alarm bells in my head. I pushed my cart down the aisle, trying not to let my imagination run wild. Maybe he just happened to need something from the same section. Maybe he wasn't paying attention to me at all. But even as I turned the corner into the next aisle, there was an odd vibe in the air that I couldn't ignore. I moved quickly through the store, grabbing the last few things I needed as fast as I could. I wasn't in the mood to linger anymore. The cozy familiarity of the store had started to feel suffocating. I felt like I was being watched. By the time I reached the dairy section, my cart was nearly full and I was ready to check out. That's when I saw him at the far end of the aisle, just staring at me. This time, I couldn't brush it off. He wasn't browsing, wasn't shopping. His cart was still empty. I tried to make sense of it, tried to tell myself it was all in my head, but every time I moved, he moved. Every time I turned a corner, he was there. He never got close, just close enough to make his presence known. Close enough to make me feel like I couldn't breathe. I felt stupid. This was a public place, full of people. Nothing bad could happen here, right? It's a grocery store. You're safe in a grocery store. I tried to calm myself down, yet whenever I looked around, I noticed him in the distance. His expression never changed, just the same cold stare. It was the way he looked at me, like I wasn't even a person, just something to watch, something to follow. I looked around at the other shoppers, hoping someone would notice, would see what was happening, and step in. But no one paid any attention. They were all lost in there, pushing carts and comparing prices, completely unaware of the growing panic tightening in my chest. I thought about leaving, just abandoning my cart and getting out of there, but a weird sense of pride, or maybe just stubbornness, kept me rooted to the spot. I didn't want to overreact. I made my way to the checkout lanes, my hands shaky as I loaded my items onto the conveyor belt. For the first time in what felt like hours, I didn't see him. The cashier rang up my items and I forced a smile, trying to act normal. My hands were still trembling as I reached for my wallet, fumbling with my credit card. "You all right, ma'am?" the cashier asked. I opened my mouth to say something, to explain what had been happening, but the words wouldn't come. I felt stupid again, embarrassed. What was I supposed to say? Some guys following me around the store. What if I was wrong? What if it was all in my head? "Yeah, I'm fine," I lied, giving her a tight-lipped smile as I grabbed my bags. I saw him again. This time, he was standing near the entrance, leaning against the wall, just watching. I felt my stomach lurch as nausea washed over me. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned back to the cashier, my voice shaky, as I whispered, "Can you get someone? I think that man is following me." Her eyes widened, and she immediately called over a manager. Within minutes, a store employee, big, burly, and with a non-nonsense look on his face, approached me. I pointed toward the man at the entrance, my voice barely a whisper, as I explained what had been happening. The employee nodded and made his way over to the man, who, upon seeing him approach, quickly turned and walked out of the store. He didn't run, didn't hurry. He just left like nothing had happened. I stood there watching as the automatic doors slid shut behind him. I didn't feel any relief, though the whole thing left me cold, like something was unfinished. I couldn't shake the feeling that he'd be waiting outside, or that I'd see him again somewhere else. The store employee came back a few minutes later, his face serious but calm. "He's gone," he said. "I watched him drive off. Do you need someone to walk you to your car?" I nodded, grateful but still shaken, as we made our way across the lot. I kept looking around, expecting the man to appear again, to be hiding behind one of the cars, standing in the shadows waiting for me, but he wasn't there. I drove home that night, every muscle in my body tense. I couldn't stop checking my rearview mirror, convinced that I'd see his car trailing behind me, following me home. But there was nothing. No one. I never saw him again. But the memory of that day still haunts me. I think about it every time I walk into a store, every time I feel a pair of eyes on me when I'm in public. Maybe he was just some creep, looking to make someone uncomfortable. Or maybe it was something worse. I'll never know. To this day, the mundane task of grocery shopping feels loaded with tension. I don't linger in the aisles anymore. I don't wander the store casually like I used to. I move quickly, keeping my head down, my eyes scanning for anything or anyone that feels off. Because I've learned that even in the most ordinary places, you're never really safe if these stories had you double checking over your shoulder in the store. Hit the like button and subscribe for more creepy tales that'll make even the most ordinary moments feel terrifying. Got your own eerie supermarket encounter? Drop it in the comments. We want to hear all the chilling details, and don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss a new video. Stay safe out there, and remember, trust your instincts when something feels off. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.